remember when we went to Mima Frances' house, we would all, like at the end of the day or something, we would all curl up on her lap and she would read to us Little Black Sambo, and I still loved it. I remember little bits of the story.
My earliest and one of my best memories is actually meeting Frances for the first time. I was a little bit nervous because Gary and I weren't engaged, but he wanted me to meet Frances, and so we drove up to Kentucky, and I remember pulling into her carport and opening the screen door and then knocking on the door. And she opened the door, and just as soon as she saw me, she just hugged me. She didn't know me, but I feel like she loved me immediately just because, you know, of how I was connected with Gary, and also I loved her immediately.
I just remember walking into Mima Frances' room and just writing down all of the things that were on my mind and I wanted to tell her, and just her looking at them on that little notepad, smiling, or it was so much to me that even though she couldn't speak, or it was just still very good that we could still communicate. And it was just really nice.
One of my most special memories was when Amy had died and I visited Billy and Frances for the first time alone. And I was in my room reading one night, and there was a little knock on the door, and Billy said, "Gary, we wouldn't mind if you wanted to join us for our devotion time." And every night they would read together and they would pray, and it was just so sweet for them to invite me into that time. And I realized that night that they read and they prayed for their family and for their friends every night, and I was just really struck by their consistency.
I remember once when we went to her house, and she had these blue and white plates, or they were bowls, but they had these different animals on them. And so she always had Raisin Bran at her house, and I always wondered, I was like, why can't Mom get Raisin Bran? Mima Frances had this. And so we would get the Raisin Bran, we'd have it for breakfast. I loved it, I had it like every morning. And then I always wanted, there was this certain plate or this bowl that had the little lamb on it, and I loved that one, and I always wanted to get that one. And I just loved that about her house.
When I think of our visits to Bowling Green, I remember her coconut cake, her biscuits, the asparagus from her garden, the little toy box that our girls loved to play in. And I just remember the first time we would get there and arrive, we'd open the door and she had that sweet, warm hug for us. And she'd say, "Hey, how are you?" And it was just so wonderful to see that smile.
I remember she had this big jar of buttons that we would always spill out over her floor, and I loved trying to pick out my favorite ones, and we would look through them together, and she'd smile and show me one, and I'd show her ones, and it was so much fun. I remember bowling. We used to bowl in her house. I remember the dolls on the big bookshelf that was in that room. We used to love just getting those down and playing with them. I remember that little book corner, and it had a little snowman, and Dad would always imitate that snowman, and sometimes we loved it, but sometimes we hated it. And I think the first thing that comes to mind when I think of her is just her smile, because it's so her, and whenever I think of her, the first thing that ever comes to mind is just her sweet, gentle smile. And also, I was named after her. My name's Frances Elizabeth. And I really, it's cool to know that I wasn't just named after a name, but it has a person, and it's someone to look up to. And looking up to her, she gives me such a good role model as to like who I strive to be in my life.
Anyone who knows Frances knows that she loved to read, and once she told me that it had been her ambition to read the greatest English novel ever written. And so she had heard that most people believe that to be Middlemarch by George Eliot.
Her genuineness and her sweet, sweet spirit.
I remember one time when she was in a nursing home. We drove to the nursing home, but we stopped and we looked at this lake. And in the lake there were just fishes swimming all across it, and we just thought it was like the best thing ever. So we couldn't wait to go in there and tell me about Frances. So we told her and she smiled, and that was a lot of fun.
I remember when we used to go visit her in the nursing homes that we would walk up and she would wave that dainty little wave that she has, and we would see her smile and her eyes would just light up. You could tell that like when she saw us, her eyes would just like, they'd kind of sparkle. And then we would talk to her by writing the messages, and I remember she used to we told her once that when we were in England, I think, about how it snowed, and she was like, oh, you could tell she was kind of excited about like the snow that we had seen, and we were telling her all about our adventures, and she would just smile. And every time I left, I would bend down and I'd kiss her on the cheek, and then she'd hold my hand really tightly and kiss me back.
She taught me so much, even though I only knew her for 16 or so years, but one thing that I know she influenced me was the way that she loves birds, and the way that she would sit and watch them out her kitchen window. And now I also love birds. I love to watch them, and I know that I got that from her. And also African violets. She would always say that her African violets thrived on neglect. So I tried them for myself, and unfortunately I don't have the same green thumb, but I do love them and enjoy them.
Well, we will really miss Mima Frances. We love her so much, and really the last few years we've already been missing her. Every time we would visit her in the nursing home, we would walk back to the car, and we would get in the car, and we would just say, I miss her. I miss talking to her. I miss hearing her stories. And I just wish we could have her one more time take us through her garden and tell us what the plants are. I wish she could tell me about her trip to St. Simon's and all that with her friends. I wish she could tell us about the birds that she's seen in her yard. I wish she could just tell us stories looking at the photo albums of when they were young on the farm, and we just miss her heart. We miss her little smile, and we will definitely remember her. She was a very, very special person.
Can I give you my beautiful green umbrella? But the tiger said, how can I carry an umbrella when I need all my clothes for walking with? You could tie a knot in your tail and carry it that way, said Little Black Sambo. So I could, said the tiger. Give it to me, and I won't eat you this time. So he got poor little Black Sambo's beautiful green umbrella and went away saying, now, I'm the grandest tiger in the jungle. And poor little Black Sambo went away crying because the cruel tigers had taken all his fine clothes.